Welcome to Outrage Astrology. My name's Mike,
And I'm Brittany.
where we talk about, predictive and relationship and any type of astrological topic under the sun. Sometimes we'll piss you off a little bit. We really don't hold back. But if you listen closely and pay attention to our playful little banter, you might learn a little something. So, what are we talking about today, Brittany?
We're talking about solar arcs. We've been gone forever, and now we're finally back with arcs, my favorite.
Yes, solar arcs well, I wouldn't say it's like the crowning piece of our predictive astrology series, but it's one of the more important ones that we're going to be doing because solar arcs they're terribly underrated in terms of how useful they can actually be. And by the way, doesn't Brittany look absolutely just stunning? You can actually see her face this time instead of just her making blank pauses and banter while she laughs at me.
Crazy noises.
Yeah. So solar arcs are actually incredibly underrated, but very, very powerful. And as Brittany has said before in previous podcasts, she likes the types of predictive methods that smack you in the face, that really point to an event occurring, not just a whole general feeling or,
Astrology in general should not be so convoluted that you have to pull something from this way and this way. When I start to listen to astrologers express why they think something is a certain way, and you see this a lot on like Facebook groups. Well, they'll be like, well, the ruler of this house is making this to this house, but then if you look at the return, it's making it this to this house, and therefore, but it's on this sign, and therefore,
it's very difficult to delineate when you begin to convolute it to that level.
Right. So that's not what astrology should be. It shouldn't be that hard to find major shifts in your life.
Well,
if it's that hard, it's not working.
To most astrologers' credit, though, life in itself is very nuanced. That's just life. There's a lot of different feelings. There's a lot of moods. There's a lot of periods. There's periods of internal development, and there's periods of external stimulus. And that all needs to be taken into account. The
rule that I follow, and I think a lot of astrologers follow this, I know you do, Mike, is that if you don't see something repeated in three, especially when you're doing predictive charts, if you don't see it repeated 3 times.
I'll pay attention to it, but not really. If I see someone that's reoccurring, chart after chart after chart, method after method after method, boom, we're onto something.
Same thing with the birth chart. If you don't see a theme start to develop, something's wonky. Okay, so we moved platforms. We're now here on YouTube. We've made our new home on Mike's Astro YouTube channel. I feel like this platform
presents Outrage Astrology.
I feel like this platform will reach more of you guys. It's a little more fun for you to be able to like actually watch us make weird faces at each other. Right?
All right, so solar arcs. Why do people use solar arcs? Where did they come from?
All right, so a little history. We have to have a little history on secondary progressions. So secondary progressions are, the day for a year. For each day of your life, you look at where the planets were at that particular time, that particular day, and they're going to correspond to a whole year of your life. So it's going to take a really long time for most things in a secondary progression to move much. The moon, the ascendant, they're going to move a little quicker. But even the moon, it takes, 2.5 years to change.
13 degrees per year.
Yeah, to ingress into a new sign in secondary progressions. And we realized that it's timing events with progressions is challenging because they're really reflecting these very slow over time movements.
Yeah.
So
they can definitely point major turning points, and they're definitely something that needs to be paid attention to within the context of a broader predictive analysis. But solar arcs give us the benefit of watching every single planet move and make aspects to other planets and midpoints and produce actual tangible events. Because a lot of stuff happens within a year. Not a lot of stuff happens within a progressed chart within a year. But
the other thing is progressions get off a little bit at a time because somebody who's born in the summer versus the winter is going to have a different diurnal motion, different movement. The sun is going to move at a different rate than it moves, those two different people. So you're going to accumulate a lot of discrepancy in a progression without the software to calculate it for you. The software is going to correct for that when you use Astro.com or whatever else. But solar arcs kind of came into effect, or people kind of thought, oh, let's do it this way, when they realized it's a lot easier to calculate a solar arc because it's doing a day for, or a degree for a year. So everything is going to move at once. All your planets are going to move together like a second hand on a clock.
Exactly.
For every year.
And then this isn't just like another method that somebody just sort of came up with. It differs from secondary progressions because instead of each planet moving at a different rate, they're all moving at the same rate, 1 degree per year. It is something that has been tried, tested, and statistically does work. It has worked for me in many of the experiments that I've done, especially involving minor or secondary progressions to, not secondary progressions, I apologize for that, indirect arcs to midpoints. The findings that I have made as a result of conducting experiments using those types of arcs, which we will go over later on in the podcast, have been shockingly accurate. Now, if you take that and you put that within the context of other predictive methods, say transits, secondary progressions, which are different and slower and a little bit more gradual, but are still important nonetheless, and putting that within the context of other methods, a couple Hellenistic methods that like zodiacal releasing. Chris Brennan has a couple phenomenal podcasts discussing that. You can actually form a very accurate description of what's going to be going on within somebody's life within a predetermined period of time. Did I go a little bit off on that?
No, I think it's good to really, I think what you're trying to get at is, yes, the whole picture is important, and that solar arcs are especially important for actual events.
Yes.
So that's just how it pieces all together. They're just pieces of the puzzle. But I like solar arcs. I look at them first. I think, different astrologers, what do you look at first? Don't you look at secondary progressions first or transits first? You do transits first, right?
I look at transits first.
Yeah.
And then I look at secondary progressions. And then I look at, I have a whole method. We will build it all together.
Yeah, but
I've created a synthesized method. I've created a synthesized method, and it's step by step by step. And in the last video, I will show how to piece all the different methods that we go over in our podcasts together. But transits are like the go-to when it comes to predictive astrology. Transits are the oldest. Robert Hand came out with a beautiful book, Planets in Transit, in the 70s that revolutionized modern astrology and the way that transits are interpreted. And since that book has come out, transits have been the go-to, but it's far more nuanced even than transits would suggest. So transits followed by secondary progressions, followed by solar arcs, followed by return charts like solar returns and lunar returns, and then solar arcs are probably like the 4th most popular.
Yeah. So and I do my like when I'm pulling up predictive stuff, the first thing I look at is arcs, and then I look at transits, and then I look at. So you're gonna figure it out, but just real quick, just to let you guys know, pick up this book by Noel Till if you really want, the transit Bible, in my opinion. He's got, exactly how to do the whole process. And he actually will list what all the arcs. He'll tell you, he'll tell you what all the arcs are, and he will even tell you what the indirect arcs are. So it's just Noel Till's solar arcs.
And when interpreting the indirect arcs, which are arcs from solar arc planets to midpoints within your chart, another phenomenal resource to gain accurate interpretations of those planetary combinations is Points and Planetary Pictures by Alfred Witte, who developed the Uranian method of astrology. That's also a phenomenal resource to use to help piece together what certain secondary arc or what certain indirect arcs will produce.
Will you link them in your description so that they can see the spelling and the books we're talking about?
Yeah, Points and Planetary Pictures by Alfred Bitsa. But yes, I will link it in the bottom. Maybe to Amazon, but probably not to Amazon because that book's extremely expensive on there. You can find it cheaper and actually, you know what? I think I'll do that. I'll find the cheapest place to get it and I'll link it in the bottom.
Cool.
Anyway.
So number one rule of arcs is that birth time has really got to be exact, because especially for your really like big life moments, if your birth time is off by more than about 2-3 minutes, really, you're done. You're done with all the luminaries and all the angles or not the luminaries, but with the angles. And the angles are really, stuff hitting your angles are a big deal.
Arcs to the ascendant are extremely important, and because that's just a sensitive spot. And aspects in solar arcs, there is no orb allowance.
No.
It's
zero.
It has to be exact. It has to be within a degree. And it's good for 6 months before and 6 months after it becomes exact.
And that's why that birth time is so important, because if you're off at all, you're talking a year or more off in your prediction. So you might be like, oh, this year looks like a big shift in your career. Well, we might have been looking at something that happened 7 years ago for them because their birth time is off by 15 minutes. So get the right birth time. And we can go over, we will go over rectification in another video, but exact birth time. The other thing about arcs is which aspects we use. So an arc is an arc is an arc. Okay. So it doesn't matter.
Aspects to build an arc.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you're only looking at the hard aspects. You're only looking at conjunctions, oppositions, squares, and some degrees, sesquiquadrants, and semi-squares. But you don't say solar arc Venus is up in opposition to natal sun. You say solar arc, or you say solar arc Venus, it's arcing to natal sun. It doesn't matter which one it is.
There's no difference in interpretation between the different aspects. Like, it is what it is. Those two planets are making contact, and so it builds an interpretation.
Yeah.
It's not like with transits, the different aspects bring about different outcomes as a result of the interpretation of what the aspects mean. That's one of the coolest things about solar arcs, in my opinion, is it streamlines the whole process. It just matters that the 2 points are talking. That's it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful to me.
Yeah, it's simple. It's simple astrology.
It's like Venus, Pluto, boom, 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 obsession. There's no like light obsession or mild obsession. No, obsession. Well, it's not always obsession for that particular
Pluto. So like, here's a big one for you. I have dug into this one a lot. Is Pluto arcing to the ascendant?
Death.
No.
I know.
That would be like
it arced to the ascendant when I was 13.
So yeah, so Pluto arcing to the ascendant is what I've seen in 90% of the cases is it's a major move in your life. Like physically relocating is very common. Uranus does the same thing a lot of times with arcing, but it
did not make that type of change in my chart, but it made a very big change.
So, and here's the other thing. You did experience it when you were what, 13?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's something to keep in mind though. For some people, they are not going to see some of these arcs directly affecting them as a child. A lot of times your family kind of absorbs the loss. So whereas it might have been a divorce, if it were, we'd be looking at a divorce for an adult when they have that arc. If it happened when you were 7, that might have been when your parents were divorced. They're absorbing that.
But let's say you see somebody who's like 75 and you see Pluto's about to arc to the ascendant. I'd be a little concerned.
I'd be a little concerned too.
Saturn arcing to the ascendant, or yeah.
But and one more thing, just like transits, you're not going to feel or see every single arc. It's just not how astrology works.
It's gonna here's the thing: is it's gonna have an effect. You may not realize.
Yeah, you may not realize it, but
in hindsight, though, you will be like, okay, well, it did have an effect. Though that particular combination of energies made an impact. I just wasn't fully cognizant of what was going on at that time.
Yeah.
Some of them are slap you in the face. Some of them are more of a residual effect.
The slap you in the face ones are the ones that involve the luminaries and that are involving the angles.
Yes. Or Pluto or the nodes, Uranus. That's just what I've noticed. That's what I've noticed. I'm sorry.
Okay. Whatever.
I mean, you've spent countless hours researching such just as I have, but
I think you have researched it more because you have to pull up all 165 people whose charts that you have stored and studied with arcs. But what I'm saying is, okay, so if somebody says to me astrology is bullshit, what I'm going to go and look at is when some, major arc happened in their 20s that involved an angle or involved the sun and the moon. And I'm going to say, what happened when in the summer of 95 or whenever that was for the, you know what I'm saying? What happened then? And they're going to be like, oh shit, that this and this happened. It was a big deal. Those are big ones.
Nothing,
okay,
it was something like summer of 69. I'm just saying.
What'd you say?
Summer of... Never mind.
I was singing it too. And I was like, no, don't say that. Don't say that. Because then you're going to look really dorky.
Yeah,
but now you look dorky and not me.
Okay, so how do you find your solar arcs? How do you do it? You can do it through Astro.com. See, the cool thing is solar arcs, they're not as popular as they should be, but they are well known enough for almost every single astrology software to have a way of calculating them.
Okay, so when you're looking, okay, let's start here. I'll tell you how to do it on Astro.com. So you're going to go to your free horoscopes, your extended chart selection, and then you're going to, on chart type, pick solar arc natal and solar arc direction. Mike showed me this cool trick. You can do this. You don't have to, but it makes it a little bit cleaner. You can go down to your display and calculation options under aspects and take your orb down to like 10.
That's what I do now. And then when you go to the extended table selection, after you calculate the chart, you can scroll down to the bottom and it will list out all the exact orbs and whether they are separating or applying, which also is something that needs to be taken into account.
So it'll be if it's past, it's still going to be in effect, but it's you're going to need to know when exactly that orb was exact so that you can get an idea of where you are in the timeline. But when you're under extended chart selection, you do want to do your date. Make sure you have the date that you're actually wanting to look at. Click here to show chart. And then your PDF says additional tables. That's what you were talking about. We'll show you those arcs. So because everything is moving the same 1 degree, you only are looking at solar arc planets or angles to natal angles.
Yes.
It's pointless to compare a solar arc planet to a solar arc planet because it's going to be the exact same thing that's happening in your natal chart.
Exactly. They move in step with each other. Also, it's really important to make... So, let's say solar arc Uranus is arcing to the ascendant. It's going to have a different interpretation as if it were the planets interacting in the opposite. So, like, if solar arc Uranus to the ascendant is different if it was solar arc ascendant arcing to Uranus.
Right.
That changes the interpretation entirely. So it's very important to keep that, like, take a note of that. And Noel Teal's book in Solar Arcs, there is an index in the back. Like, for instance, Saturn to Pluto, solar arc Saturn to Pluto, is the threat of loss.
Oh, they're the same.
Huh?
That's the one that they're the same. You chose the exact.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Example that they're the same.
All right, fine. Okay, so let's say how did you even recognize that so fast? That's crazy. Anyway, all right. So Saturn arcing to the lunar node is serious attitude in relation to others or aloneness. But in the opposite, if it was the node arcing to Saturn, it would be meetings of a serious nature or encountering a lonely position. So the interpretation changes, whether it's one planet acting on another or the other planet acting on the previous planet. So that's just something that's to be kept in mind. I didn't realize that at first, actually. I thought as long as the two planets were interacting, the interpretation didn't change. And apparently, through experimentation and study, I was incorrect.
It happens like once in a while.
So.
Hardly ever.
So a really cool tool that solar arcs can be used to do is to deal with the process of birth time rectification. Now, it's very time consuming. We'll go over it briefly. Brittany's a lot better at it than I am, and it's not that I'm not good at it. It's just I don't have the fucking patience.
No, you're really, I think together we're the shit at rectification.
Probably, but you need a lot of different dates to be able to.
You do. Yeah. So it's just you're going to be cross-checking whenever you come up with, and like I said, we'll do a whole thing on rectification, but solar arcs are great for fine-tuning it, because you might get it to where you're pretty sure that these planets are in these houses, you've got a good window, but you're trying to really narrow down the time. That's when your solar arcs are going to come into play, and you're going to start looking for those luminary and angles and tweaking it. In fact, it's funny because my birth time is 12:34 a.m. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. But I've actually, according to my mom, I actually rectified my chart to 12:33 by a minute, because
I rectified a friend's birth time. I would say it's pretty accurate. However, time will tell. From 1:30 in the morning to 1:22, and actually it made a huge difference, because that 8 minutes changed the degree of the ascendant by 3 degrees, which is huge. It's a 3-year difference.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't matter just for arcs, okay? When you get into, like Mike's talking about, the zodiacal releasing and some of these other like Hellenistic methods, getting the lots or the part of fortune, whichever one you call it, those you really have to have an exact birth time. So whenever you're doing predictive, you want to rectify. Okay, so one thing you've gotten way into, more so than I have, because I think you have way more patience for this kind of stuff, is the indirect arcs, which are midpoints.
Well, it's really interesting because, Noel Teal is borrowing from Alfred Witte, who was a Uranian astrologer. And a little bit of history on Alfred Witte. I wanted to go over this because I think it's the most interesting thing ever. Alfred Witte was a German surveyor, astronomer, and astrologer. And he was working for the German military during World War I. And he believed that he could use modern astrology to predict the timing of Russian artillery bombardments on the German lines on the Eastern Front during World War I. And he was not able to produce the results that he had hoped for using modern astrology. And so over time, he developed the Uranian method. And that's the method of using midpoints. And work with midpoints had already began, mostly in Germany and England prior to that. But his employment of these particular points, the midpoints between particular planetary combinations, and their usage in predictive methods, totally revolutionized this particular segment of astrology. And it's funny because you don't see, like, there's so many people that are like militantly into Hellenistic astrology right now, and then there's some people that are still mired in psychological modern astrology. And I found that with these midpoint interpretations, and also the midpoint interpretations from Alfred Witte's points and planetary pictures, you can really color the analysis of a solar arc and create a very rich story of what's going to be happening in this period of time, through any period of time. Because a lot of times somebody will only see you're just sitting there smiling at me, like rolling your eyes.
No, you know why? Because I'm thinking about your 9th house Saturn and how much you love this stuff. That's all. I'm just thinking.
Well, I mean, I do have a day chart, so Saturn's mostly constructed in the 9th house. So, now, see, you threw everything off. You threw everything. Okay, so anyway, where was I even at now?
Some shit about World War I.
Anyway,
about how he couldn't use these particular
way past that. We're way past that. We're on Alfred. We're okay. Anyway, so when somebody looks at the number of solar arcs that we'll have throughout a year of time, you'll only get like 3 or 4 arcs. In fact, I did a consultation for a client a couple weeks ago where he literally had no major arcs for the entire year.
I have no major arcs this year.
Didn't we go? Did I actually do your midpoint analysis for you?
Oh, you're talking about my midpoint arcs. Yeah, but I don't even have that much interesting going on my midpoints, much less my direct arcs.
Well, that's why it was important to look at the transits and then to focus in on the few midpoint arcs that you had, because some of your transits are a little bit.
Yeah, I've got some interesting stuff on my progression. So I got in a wreck on Friday, guys, and I'm really disappointed because there's no transit that says shit about me getting in a wreck. There was no warning.
Well, you do remember that Mars was void of course.
Yeah, Mars was void, but we haven't really done a lot of research on that. So, hey, if you guys want to like make us super happy, go do a bunch of research on void of course Mars and tell us what happens.
I mean, I honestly could. There's other methods you can use to predict events like that, and zodiacal releasing is really good for those types of things. A void of course Mars is definitely something to pay attention to because anything could happen, and especially if there's related to Mars.
Anything could happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
He's done talking to me.
But anyway, I'm worked up now. So actually, we should do a video on zodiacal releasing, at least my take on zodiacal releasing, because I have some very interesting theories and concepts that I would like to continue my research on. But you really can't color the interpretation of a solar arc by using arcs to the midpoints. And it's difficult to do. I'll put that up now. So let's go over how we do that. How me and you have done that, Astro. It's time consuming, and I've tried to use software. There is a software that's available for MacBook that or for iPad that will calculate it for you, but they conflicted entirely with my calculations. And since I was doing my calculations manually, I would say that software is just not geared correctly. Yeah. You need to go to Astro.com has a midpoint grid chart.
Okay, so go over how to get to this because it's kind of hard to find if you don't know your way around it. It's not a super easy chart to pull up. So you have to first pull up your midpoint chart.
Worth the work. I do promise you it is worth the work.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is because your arcs are broad brush strokes. And then the midpoint arcs are filling in the details. And then the transits, it creates a full picture once you bring that other stuff in. But if you just do solar arcs, it's going to be very broad brush strokes.
Yeah. And the details, I mean, life is in the details.
The devil is in the details.
God is in the details.
I say the devil is in the details.
Whatever.
Which is it? Which is the correct saying?
I think it's honestly both.
I'm going to fucking Google it right now.
Oh, God. Okay, so where are we at?
No, it's an idiom. It's the devil's in the details. But hold on. Oh, it derives from the earlier phrase. God is in the details. You win, Mike.
No, I was just the more traditional school of thought on the matter, and then you took a more modern approach, as most things go.
Wow, you guys hear that? He didn't even take it. I gave it to him, and he was like, no, babe. It's okay. We're both right.
Yeah, babe. Absolutely.
All right. So you go to chart drawing style, and you go to Eberton style with midpoints.
Yep. Really, they have that because I've been using a grid chart.
Yeah. And then, well, you still have to have the grid. So then you click here to show the chart. The actual chart is going to be some shit you don't even want. Then you click the PDF, show additional table, or
Wait, you're telling me on Astro.com there's a circle chart that points out midpoints?
It's not real. I mean, yeah, but you can't really read it. It's pretty useless.
So you won't be able to pull PDF table with the aspects being made to midpoints?
No, well, it'll tell you the natal stuff, but not solar arc stuff.
Oh yeah, God no. Oh, I know what you're talking about, and I'm not a big fan of those. I know what you're talking about. It's all a text file.
Yeah.
And it's like the way that your Saturn and your Jupiter meets is in the 11th house in Aries.
No. That's not what I'm talking about pulling up. What I'm talking about pulling up with this Ebertine style with midpoints, it pulls up a circular chart, and then you click this PDF additional tables, and it will bring down like a 2-page PDF file that tells you your planetary positions and your midpoint structures and aspects, and then it will list the midpoints in zodiacal order, and then it will list them in 90-degree order.
Okay. There is an actual just grid table that it's divided into 2 parts, and in one part it shows the aspects between the planet, and in the other half it shows the midpoints. And you can then go through. What I usually do is if I see...
Is this on astro.com?
Yes, it is.
Okay, tell me how to get to this.
Okay.
Because I don't look at the...
It says midpoint grid chart. All right, where do I find it? Pull in Astrolog. And then...
Okay, so what he's talking about is where it says sections.
You go to pull in Astrolog, and then when you go to the chart type, it literally says aspect
midpoint grid. Okay, so you go to sections where it says round, special, ephemeris, or pull in /astrolog, and then it says aspect in the drop down menu, aspect / midpoint grid chart. Okay, let's see what we get. Okay, so tell me how. Yeah, I've seen this one. How do you work with this one?
Okay, so what I basically do is I'll find where a solar arc planet is. So let's say the sun is at 16 degrees Taurus. I will go through that chart manually, and I will look for 16 degrees in any fixed sign. Because if it's in a fixed sign, then I'll know that it's making either an opposition, conjunction, or square. So if I see 16 degrees in Taurus, I'm looking for 16 degrees in either Taurus, Aquarius, Scorpio, or Leo.
Right, but see, I'm confused because it's just showing. Hold on, I'm trying to figure out how to read this chart. I'm trying to figure out how it's actually showing me. Fuck it, I'll deal with it later. Oh, okay, I get it. So like, you go up one and you go up the other, and then it's gonna say the midpoint is at, like for me, it's saying like here's the moon and Mars, so my midpoint is at 27 degrees Libra. Okay, I'm with you.
So you would be looking for a solar arc planet that is at 27 degrees Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, or Libra.
Right. So, okay, this is just a different, I actually like looking at this better. So it depends on how you like to look at it. If you want to look at it as a table, like list format, or if you want to look at it as a grid chart. Yeah,
the grid chart has just worked well for me. And like I said, there is one software that will do it for you, and it doesn't even get it right. It pisses me off. So I have to do everything by hand. So any type of analysis, I'm like, you got to give me some time. I'm going to do it, but I got to like literally sit down, drink like 4 cups of coffee and go.
This is why it's worth a lot of money, you guys. It's because
this is why my good consultations are worth a lot of money.
Yeah, we have to do hours, and then we sit there and talk it over with you. But I think we are like incredibly reasonable for our consults too.
Reasonable or desperate?
I think we're very reasonable.
I'm about to not be so reasonable, but
I don't think you should be that reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we pretty much covered how they work, what they do. There are websites you can go to that will probably tell you what the different. Don't kill yourself.
Sorry.
What the different arcs? I know. What the different arcs are, but the book that we follow is this. For the most part, and from what we've seen in life.
In Alfred Witz's Points and
Planets. This big fancy book that...
It's not fucking fancy. It is a landmark in astrological study. I'm sorry, just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it's some fancy book.
Apparently you said it's like really expensive, so...
It's expensive because it's worth its weight in gold.
Have you read this book?
Yes.
Okay.
I had another one of my clients who happened to have had this book because I couldn't get a hold of it. She sent me, I woke up in the middle of the night to like, you have 360 something messages. And she literally like screenshotted every single, it is fucking wild. I couldn't even believe that she did this. I was like, why do I have 360 something messages on fucking, on Messenger? And I was like, wow, she really sat there and did that for me. Brittany wouldn't have done that for me.
I made you a whole PDF of a particular thing, but I don't know about 360 pages.
I'm just saying.
That sounds like somebody who wants to fuck you. All right, so
watch this podcast too.
Sorry to call you out like that.
All right. Okay, so
I'm like, I like you, bud, but I don't know if I like you 360 pages worth. Okay, so anyway, are there any particular arcs that you've seen in your life that you're like, holy shit? Like, what was your holy shit, this works moment?
Oh yeah, I was just about to talk about that. So there was a particular arc to a midpoint, and it was the solar arc north node arcing to the Pluto-Venus midpoint, and important romantic contact, possible unfolding of painful melodramatic drama. I got my heart ripped out and almost killed myself.
Okay, but in fairness, is that not the story of your whole life anyway?
No, it's not the story of my whole life.
Dramatic unfolding in dire ways.
It had never happened like that before. No.
Okay. All right.
No, there's been a lot of drama in my life. Yes, I'm predisposed to that kind of thing, but that was probably the worst. So that was one of that in addition to a bunch of like difficulties making contacts. Like 2017 was a developmental year for me, but it was very painful and very difficult. And when I particularly outlined that year, it literally to a T described everything. It was bad. Like that was when I was like, okay, I might be onto something. Yeah. And then I used a bunch of other experiments to start building my synthesized method, which it's complicated.
It sounds very official.
Yeah, I've been tying it into a lot of philosophical. Have you ever heard of Epicureanism?
I mean, I know the word and I could spell it, and that's about it.
Okay, we'll go over it in a later video, but I'll be putting out a lot more on my particular codified method here fairly shortly. So yeah, so that's it. That's solar arcs. Have we done a video on solar returns yet?
I think you have, but we did.
No, we didn't. We have to do it next.
Okay. We'll do it next.
I have a book.
All right. That's all, folks. We will see you next time.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Outrage Astrology. We will have new content posted regularly. Much apologies for our hiatus, but I can assure you that much development has taken place within the release of, or in between the release of this podcast and the previous one. So, yeah.
We'll bring you more great stuff next time.
My name's Mike.
And I'm Brittany.